is, Adam and Eve is sin, is the consequences. And when I say consequences, I don't know how to put that, but I lived in New York City for a number of years and worked at NYU Medical Center, and I personally saw what in the 80s, what AIDS did to the homosexual community. The reason why I bring that out here is what is the result of sin is that there was a phrase, God will always forgive, man sometimes forgives, but nature will never forgive. And what I said to you is that ultimately is that when we sin, the only person we eventually hurt is ourselves. And so we need to understand the consequences of sin and the consequences of our actions. Pope John Paul said so well in his development of theology. He talked about we hear about the communion of saints. He talked about the communion of sin. And by the communion of sin is that our actions have so many implications in so many different ways. I have a child that was adopted, whose birth mother did drugs, and his frontal lobe just doesn't function. It's not his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. But the consequences of her sin, if we want to use that term, has severely limited his ability to live a good life. So I think we need to look at that. Original sin, what is it? Fallen human nature. Adam and Eve offended God. The results of that is we can't hurt God. God is perfect in every way. We hurt ourselves. And so we read in Romans, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, death through sin, and this way came to all men because all have sinned. Our God the Father is the eternal. We're going to get some deeper theology. I think St. Anselm's coming up soon. God the Father is the eternal being. Adam and Eve could not make up for offending God. Depending on who you offend, oftentimes means different consequences. And I might want to focus on this for a minute. I don't know who you are. I don't know how you talk to your kids. I'm very practical when I talk with my kids. I never talk to them at any level different than where they're at. So I try to relate as many things to their experience. Well, if I say to them, that was bad and you hurt God, they're going to say, what are you talking about, Dad? You're really going to focus on how has this affected you in your relationship to God. So when we talk about that, we say God the Father is the eternal being. Eternal being is an abstract concept, if we can use that term. We don't understand what eternal is because we live in time and space, but we can at least use our imagination. It's something beyond our experience. Adam and Eve could not make up for... Adam and Eve offended God. If we offend somebody, if we've done something wrong, we have to make up. If you want to be legal, we say we have to make them whole. Depending on who you offend, oftentimes it depends on the consequences. I think that's very simple. If my son, this week, cheated, which I would never say he did, and I get an email from his teacher, which I'll never say I got, and which he got an F on his class, which I'll never say he did, he has to accept the consequences. And so when I go to the assistant principal, and I say to him, I understand he cheated, I understand he got an F, what can he do to make this up? And they tell me there are 3 things he can do to make this up and get his grade back up to a C. So depending on who you offend, oftentimes means different consequences. So when we look at that, that if you run a red light and you stop by the police, you pay your $35, you say, yeah, I'm a schmuck, I run the red light, here's my $35, and you're done. You cheat on your homework assignment, you get an F, you say, okay, I can do 2 extra reports, I can make up for it. If you kill somebody in New York City or Ferguson, Missouri, how do you make up for it? It's incommensurate. I'm not taking sides there. I'm saying it's incommensurate. So when we look at the actions, I think we need to understand when we catechize our children in salvation history that there are some things you and I are capable. I'm sorry, I didn't pay my taxes. Here are my taxes, and here's my interest, and here's my penalty. We're done. But there are some things you can't. How, when somebody dies of a violent crime, how do you say, I'm really sorry, I'll name a park after your daughter? It doesn't work that way because it will never make up for the loss. And so when we look at that, we look at the Israeli experience, the Jewish experience, that they understand that sense of loss. They understand that you can never make up for it. And so they come to God and say, only God can make us whole. Only God can give us the deliverance that we need. So when we look at this, and we look at a lot of the Hebrew scriptures, which I really love. We pray the songs, O come, thou rod of Jesse, which is part of the song. O come, thou rod of Jesse. Jesse is the father of King David. Thine own from Satan's tyranny, from the depths of hell, thy people save and give them victory over the grave. Is that, again, when I used that term earlier, Zitzenleben, I like that term. I've always used it. I've used it for 20 plus years. You got to enter into their experience. The only thing they know is, if you look at Israel, I mean they're that big, and everybody's trying to beat on them, and everybody's trying to kill them, and they're saying, who's going to come to our defense? And so they're pleading to Jesse, who is the father of David, who's going to come to our defense? O come thou day spring. Obviously, they lived in a day where there was no such thing as an iPhone. So they actually looked to the east to see if the sun was coming up. And if the sun was coming up, it was going to be a good day. So when I say that, O day spring, they looked to cheer for the spirits thine advent here, disperse the gloomy clouds of night, the death dark shadows put to light. Poetry is so incredibly important in our catechesis. Remember what I said to you earlier, I took my kids to that Cistercian monastery, is I didn't catechize them. I said they saw something, these monks, that you don't see, and I'm only asking you to look at what they saw. So you really want to look at these experiences and to enter into those experiences so they can get a better sense of it. So we come to the $64,000 question. Okay, we've got justice, we're going to make up, we're going to make whole. So why Jesus? Remember the exercise we just went through. The greater the one offended, the more difficult to reconcile or make up. I know that. My wife told me about 3 times today. We're not going to go there. Compare Adam and Jesus. So we have Adam, who's human, and we have Jesus, who is divine. And when we look at the juxtapositioning, Adam was given the blessing over creation in the book of Exodus, the book of Genesis, authority over all creation, and then Jesus similarly has authority over all creation. Adam was tempted and failed. Jesus was tempted and passed, as you know, he was taken up on the mountain. Adam caused all mankind to be infected with sin. Jesus gave all mankind the opportunity to be forgiven of sin. Disobedience to God leads to death. Obedience to God leads to life. Adam gave authority to Satan, and Jesus took authority away from Satan. And when I say that, I mean, obviously, I don't want to say in a pejorative way, these are somewhat superficial explanations, but I think we need to understand that we as humans on the left, we're all Adam. Adam means man. No matter how good we are, somehow we still need help. And that's why we look to Jesus. When we look to Jesus, we're going to get to a second with St. Anselmo about the need for some kind of assistance to provide us. Because I say so often to my children, this side of the kingdom, we've got to put up with a lot. Is that all? What now? So Advent is not just the church's way to get ready for Christmas. You know that. I mean, today, oh my God, I was at CVS today. I was running down to Hannaford. I was getting stamps. I'm stuffing envelopes. For Christmas cards to people who I'm saying. I said, "Who's this person? I've never seen this person. Why are we sending them a Christmas card?" Right? And I was saying, but that's not what Christmas and Advent's all about. But I was saying that about 2 hours ago. I said, "Who is this person?" But we talk about that preparation, that very spiritual preparation of what Jesus is for this season. So we're getting back to what we said, lex orando, lex credende. The church prays what she believes. And I'm going to do a little break for just a minute here. Which says in the creed we profess every Sunday what we proclaim. We eat this bread and drink this cup. We proclaim our death. We've got to understand all of us relate on different levels. I have 4 kids. I parent them all differently because they're all different. And they relate differently. And so when I look at my kids, I'm much more intuitive, if you can believe that, than intellectual about a lot of things. I try to relate to their experience. That prior to about 1850, which is not too long ago, most people did not read. They did not have a catechism. They did not study theology. They lived the experience. What was the experience? It was the liturgy of the church. It was going to the Cistercian monastery. It was, to this day, every year, my wife and I go up to Enfield, New Hampshire, and I don't make my kids pray the rosary because they'll kill me if I do it. But I pray the rosary with my wife on that hill so that they will enter that Sitzenleben, enter that experience that they will understand that is. So the church prays what she believes, that each and every one of us, I've been married 21 years, and I talk with my wife. We get up every morning at 5 o'clock, we have a cup of coffee, and we run through our outlooks together about what we got to do. And I've never ceased telling you the story that virtually every morning I would wake up and I would see my father on the side of his bed praying on his knees before he got up, came downstairs. And I'm telling you that for this reason, is that ultimately salvation history, covenant theology, is really going to be about the lived experience. It may not even be in the church. It may be at 11:30 at night at the Red Arrow with my son, which I've done. Talking to him about why he's here and not there. So salvation history is not over. We have important people from the past that had no idea the role they played. And you see here that Noah, we left off, Adam and Eve. Noah, Adam and Eve, Moses, David, Mary, we all have a role to play. And I want to talk just a little bit about covenant theology. And I wouldn't be me if I didn't do a plug. And I got my glasses on, so I hope I can read this. But if you ever get a chance to get over to the bookstore, or if any of you had the opportunity to read or see any of the DVDs or Scott Hahn, I can't say enough good things about Scott Hahn. And as you probably know, Scott Hahn is a convert to Catholicism. And the reason why I want to give a good plug for him is because, and this is my opinion, is that I think he has a really great blend of, one, theology. He can take the theology, the doctrine of the church. He can take the scriptural data, if you want to use those terminology, of relating it to it, and then he can relate it to the average day human experiences of everybody. There's a famous story about Scott Hahn, who came from a Protestant background, as you probably know, and it was very, for lack of other words, it was a white Anglo-Saxon experience. And one day, when he began to really start thinking that maybe the Catholic Church was the place to be, he went to a Catholic church in Wisconsin, off of Marquette University, and he said his eyes just bugged out of his head because it was the first time he ever saw so many people of so many ethnic diversities saying the same prayers at the same time. And he said that was not his experience. So I think he really has an ability to say somehow that this is home for us, each and every one of us. So if you really want to understand salvation history, you really want to understand covenant theology, you really want to look to Scott Hahn. So if you get over there to the bookstore, you want to look at that. We all have a role to play. We can look at Corinthians. We can give up unique gifts, building up the kingdom. You, your children, each and every one of us play a part. And I think we ended there. But I'm never ended without giving a few other plugs. When we look at the Hebrew Scriptures, and I want to use the terminology imagination. I remember talking to my wife once, and each and every one of us have a journey, which is unique to each and every one of us. And I told her once, I don't want to go into this too deeply, we had a son who died at birth, and not the greatest thing to go through, let me tell you. And I said to Susie one morning about 5:15 a.m., I said, what if Michael had not died? And she kind of looked at me quizzically. And I said, because I'm somewhat flippant, I said, 3 kids from Russia would not get a ticket to the United States. So I go to Mount Calvary quite often, and I talk to Michael, and I say, thanks, because you have 3 brothers and sisters here now. And I don't know why that happened, but the reason why I say that to you is that when we look at salvation history and we look at covenant theology, we have to look at those 2 incredibly important words, what if. And when I say what if we did it this way, what if we did that way? We have to open up our minds and our imaginations to our children and say, what is being present to them that will help them grow closer to God. So when we look at salvation history, we really want to look at those extraordinarily epic experiences in theology, or the Old Testament. Some of you probably know that it was awful. It was absolutely awful. That movie Noah, did anybody see it? Oh my God, I'm telling you, they should have been shot for it. But Exodus is coming out. And the reviews are supposed to be quite good, at least in terms of but there's something important there, both for Noah and for Exodus. And what is it? Is that the experiences of the Hebrew Scriptures capture the imagination of God's power in humanity. No matter how much Hollywood wants to twist it, I don't care. It's not going to change me. But it says something so profound about the theology of the Scriptures that they can't get away from it. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille, right? Ann Baxter. Okay, they throw all that stuff. But the point is, I want to say about salvation history is that no matter what happens, we can't escape the fact that God intervenes. God intervenes with Moses. God intervenes with Noah. God intervenes with King David. God intervenes with Adam and Eve. Each time. And for you, as the primary educators of your children, you need to take that. Yes. I printed this off. I don't know if you ever heard of this thing called Google. My kids, you heard of, what's it called, BC and AD? My kids are now BG and AG, before Google and after Google. But I printed this off one of Scott Hahn's books, so you may want to take a look at it if you want to go on the web. It gives a good schemata of the chart of the covenant theologies and the various things of the first covenant, first with Adam and Eve, followed by Noah, followed by Moses, followed by King David, followed by Jesus, which is the everlasting covenant. And when you do that covenant theology, when you do that salvation theology, what you want to do is try to tie all these things together in a synthesis that even though they were separate epics, and when I say that, when I talk about I don't think it's an accident that Hollywood's making movies. It captures the imagination. It captures the imagination of people that God can do powerful things in our lives. They want to make money, but I'm fine. You want to go right ahead. But I still want to talk to you about this over here, that God enters into your life. But to look at those epic covenant positions in the Old Testament, and how God intervenes in your lives and the lives of your children. And then one last plug, and then I'll call it quits. The time here is that when we look at the original covenant, which is the covenant between God and Adam and Eve. And I read Scripture. I read Scripture a lot. I talk to my kids about it a lot. That first covenant between God and Adam and Eve is not between God and the church. It's not between God and society. It's not between God and Israel. It's between God and the family. And when you look at, and I analyze everything, my poor wife, I put everything in a spreadsheet for her, is there are 6 successive days of creation, of which that final day is the completion of the human family. First and foremost, prior to children, is man and woman. And he blesses man and woman. Pope John Paul gave his Wednesday talks back in the 80s, and they later became a book called The Original Unity of Man and Woman. And he talked about the original unity of man and woman. And for each and every one of you, each and every one of me, my wife, we need to focus on the original unity of that original covenant of man and woman. Because ultimately, you at home is going to be, as I said to you about my father, saying his prayers, kneeling on the floor by the side of the bed. That is going to be the primary covenant from which your children will learn about God and His life and their lives. Thank you. Did it?